I think you should go back there. Okay.
Well, I guess I'll start off first. So being on the spectrum, the autism.
But I will say there's a lot of protective parents, and they had to become that way because our society and our systems aren't supportive of autistic individuals, and the parents have had to learn to fight for their child.
I only
I'm getting chills.
Pokemon with him.
We're not made to survive on our own. And yet for a lot of disabled people, we end up having to do a lot of things by ourselves.
But for me to say that I haven't done that would be a lie, which is why
we love an honest person. We all have essences of internalized ableism. Even if you think you're the most politically correct, moral person, there is still essences of ableism that is in you somehow. What's up, you guys? So, new environment. I am currently staying with my mom. I just need some help resetting everything for myself. I don't know what it is about the month of February, but I feel like because we're kind of coming closer and closer to spring, I've just been super pushed to go into this weird hermit mode where I'm just recharging. Granted, I'm in a little bit of a burnout right now, so I'm recharging from that. But also on like a foundational note, I've been feeling this deep need to reevaluate everything about everything I'm doing. Just reevaluate the content that I want to make, at least for this year, because I'm sure I'm going to have to reevaluate again for next year. I don't think I'm going to be making the exact same type of content that I've been making for the past 2 years going forward into this 2024. I've given it a lot of thought, and I feel like something that hasn't sat right with me for a while is just the fact that I think sometimes as individuals who are on the internet expressing their knowledge or even their experience on something, it could be taken as I'm speaking on the behalf of every autistic person out there. And that is something I don't believe in and I don't want to enable. And I don't necessarily think that my previous videos are even that bad, because I try my hardest to encourage the fact that everyone's different. But I do think that I can make more of an effort to truly speak on my own experiences, make less blanket statements, and make the conversation more open. And also, I've just been trying to figure out in what ways can I do these types of things, you know? Because a lot of my videos in the past is just talking about some things that lower support needs autistics can go through and characteristics and things like that. I don't know if I want to keep doing that. And if I do, I'm going to be speaking on it from the perspective of my own self. I'm still ruminating on it. I'm still reflecting on it and figuring out what I want to stick to and what I want to move forward with and how I'm going to do that. I really strongly believe in approaching everything in my life in a very intentional manner. If I'm not doing that and I'm just pummeling forward, it doesn't feel right to me, and I don't feel good about myself or the things that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. And it's not something I value, you know? So today I'm going to be reacting to this Jubilee video. I've seen it on the front page of my YouTube recommended, and the title is "Can You Tell If Someone Has Autism?" I saved it because I knew I wanted to do like a blind react to it, just to see what it's about and give some opinions that come to mind. I want to preface this by saying that if you are looking for someone who has these very black and white statements, this is not the right channel for you. With the way that I like to process the world, I am a gray person. I am going to always have something I disagree with when it comes to someone. And likewise, I will always have something that I would agree with them on. And that goes for every single person out there. And I feel like it's important to voice those gray opinions, even if people don't necessarily know how to process it. Like, are you with us or against us? It's like, no, I think there's some things you guys do that are great and some things that are not great. And this is why, if you want to have a conversation about that. I'm saying that because I'm going into this video very open-minded. I've seen a lot of criticism about, I don't know her name. I've seen a lot of people critiquing her mom. And I already know that there's probably some things I would agree with on the behalf of the mom and some things I won't. But I'm not going to just base my opinion off of all the criticism that I've seen, because I don't think that's reasonable. But yes, let's get into it. Just quickly putting my headphones on.
I was on American Idol this past season. I did, I told them straight up.
Well, he's for sure autistic because he's wearing a bunch of rainbow stuff.
I'll need some of these accommodations. I was the only non-minor there who had his mom with him during that time, and I'm proud to admit that. I'm a mama's boy.
I'm already pausing the video, but I feel like that topic itself has been weighing very heavily on my mind lately. I feel like people have this idea that if you are a low support needs autistic, you are an autonomous person that just has some quirks or preferences and autistic traits, and there's no need to be dependent on another. I'm diagnosed with level 1 autism. That's considered low support needs autism, right? But at the same time, I wasn't able to move out and be on my own after high school, going into college like everyone else around me was. I, throughout college, had to live with my mom. I couldn't make enough to pay rent. But at the same time, I was working part-time while I was a full-time student. Whatever money I was making, that is what I was living off of in terms of buying food, buying school supplies, things like that. And I was barely scraping by. I also forgot to mention that although I was able to be a full-time student and have a part-time job as a waitress, mind you, which is a very exhausting job, it came at a cost. One, I had no friends, right? I couldn't balance a social life. My mental health during college was the worst that I've ever experienced. The depression was so severe. I struggled a lot with life-ending thoughts. My anxiety was horrific. I had really bad IBS and gastrointestinal issues. I had very frequent panic attacks, which could have just been meltdowns or being extremely overstimulated at the time. Sometimes that stuff can just go hand in hand. We don't really talk about things like that, right? We talk about how, let's say, higher support needs autistics can't do those things, period. But where is the conversation talking about the effects low support needs autistics go through when they force themselves to try to live by the same standards as non-autistic people, while simultaneously receiving zero support and accommodations that we definitely need because of our disability? That's another really important aspect, is we aren't even seen as valid within our disability enough to receive those accommodations or receive any sort of support, even though we also live with the disabilities. We have the same expectations placed on us as non-autistic people. Our autism is also seemingly not as valid because of the level of it. We are also struggling a lot more profoundly than people who don't have the disability altogether. The struggle is so real no matter where you are on the spectrum. And the struggle is going to be so different depending on what your background is, the level of your autism, what type of autism you have, your circumstances, your racial background, the country you're in, the class that you fall under. You know, all of these things really, really matter. And I think it is so important to talk about intersectionality when it comes to this topic. But that's the thing, is a lot of low support needs autistics are in that weird gray area of not being able to become fully independent, but at the same time, we're able to probably do a lot more than higher support needs autistic. But I feel like there's no conversation that knows how to fully explore that concept of that in-between, that gray area, because people, again, are just so polarizing. They don't know how to conceptualize that you can still struggle a lot and a lot more than an average person, but have other privileges there and other capabilities there.
Hi, I'm Gen, and I explore issues through both sides. And I'll be moderating this middle ground episode of Autistic and Neurotypical. And the first prompt is, I find the word disabled offensive. Can the agreeers please step forward?
I think you should go back there. Okay.
Well, I guess I'll start off first. So being on the spectrum, the autism.
Okay, so she wanted to, I need to figure out what her name is. Hopefully throughout this video, I will figure out what her name is, but it seemed like she wanted to come forward, but the mom told her to get back in line. But I guess I don't know if the mom was trying to help her or if the mom was just telling her what to do. And I think already I could see why people are critical of the mom, because it's always such a thin line. And mind you guys, I'm coming from the perspective of someone who's, before I did YouTube, I worked in jobs closely with autistic kids. So I was working with autistic kids and their parents for many years. And so I have certain experiences that shown me the little nuances of what that relationship dynamic is like. And the thing that people don't know is if your child is autistic and you care about them, there has to be a layer of protectiveness there and assertiveness there, not because you're a controlling person necessarily. And I'm not saying the mom is or isn't controlling. I don't know her yet, and I haven't seen much of her. But I will say there's a lot of protective parents, and they had to become that way because our society and our systems aren't supportive of autistic individuals, and the parents have had to learn to fight for their child. I've worked with autistic children with higher support needs that if the parent wasn't protective and somewhat aggressive or assertive, their child would be taken advantage of straight up. Because I've had coworkers who, frankly, they did a lot of questionable things, you know? One kid comes to mind, his mom would always come into school to check on him or come early to school. And she was always like on top of the teacher's ass and making sure she's always checking in and things like that. And the teacher I was working with would always feel so annoyed, being like, oh, this mom is always like here. She's always so controlling, blah, blah, blah. And in my mind, seeing how that mom is, but also observing how that teacher neglected and sometimes even mistreated that child in classroom when the mom's not there, I was like, of course that mom is going to be protective, because if I'm only experiencing this child for these few months of my life and you as his teacher is already somewhat neglecting him and not giving him the support he needs, then I can only imagine how many times this poor boy has experienced this with all these other different teachers in his life or authority figures. So yes, I can understand why his mom is somewhat controlling and needing to constantly check in. I would actually be concerned if his mom was not like that. So when I see a parent that's like that, that is telling someone, oh, just go stand there, or is speaking on the behalf of them and things like that, I'm not going to immediately jump to that mom is controlling and she is infantilizing her child and not letting her speak for herself. I don't think it's that simple. You know what I'm saying? We don't know what their background is and where they came from and why the mom has had to become like that. Of course, yes, the mom could just be a not great person. That could also be it, but more likely than not, it's not that simple.
Sector myself, and being someone who masks my autism pretty well, I have a hard time accepting the fact that technically, yes, I am disabled, because throughout my entire life, I've had to deal with things like sensory overload, you know, dealing with high emotions at times and stuff like that. But I also was raised to be a go-getter and to, if I put my mind to anything, I can accomplish my goals. And I have accomplished stuff. I'm a writer. I've written about being on the spectrum for Insider, the Doe, and places like that. And I don't let my disability stop me. So it's like, you know, we live in this world where having a disability is a bad thing, and most people kind of operate that way and like view disabled people in a negative light. And so for me, whenever someone calls me disabled, it's definitely a trigger for me, to be honest.
Yeah, I would agree with exactly what you're saying. That was kind of why the reason I came up as well. I feel that as a root, it's not an offensive word, but the stigma that our society has made it today has created it to be an offensive word.
My son is nonverbal. He's never said a word. What I find the problem with disabled that I've always had an issue with is it looks at my son in a way where he's supposed to be fitting into everyone else's world. Even movies that are made about autism that are supposed to be like these movies that make everybody love autism, usually at the end of the movie they do something in everyone else's world that makes them special. They catch a touchdown, they go to prom. My son's not gonna catch a touchdown. My son's not gonna go to prom. He doesn't care about those things. And sometimes you can just be who you are, and you don't have to be labeled, well, you don't do these things, so you're disabled.
Can the disagreeers please step forward?
I never read too deeply into the word disabled. It's just a descriptor of me. I'm disabled. No one's really used disabled as an insult to me, at least not in any way that I've been able to pick up on it. However, people have used the R word to me, and that is what is offensive to me. Disabled is just a descriptor. At the same time, though, I feel like this is a real test for the gray area here because I still somehow agree with what every single one of you just said, even though I disagree with the prompt. But everybody has their own relationship with words and terminology, and I think that that's what's so beautiful about the autism community.
I find myself agreeing with what James is saying, where, you know, his son probably shouldn't have to conform to the ideas that the world is setting in place. Like, maybe he's perfectly happy being nonverbal and he shouldn't be expected to talk. But at the same time, if we try and say, you know, disabilities don't exist and that everyone has to fit in this box, right, and we get rid of the term altogether, then that's kind of maybe forcing people like James's son to conform to the world.
Just to piggyback off of that, say, James, have you told your son about this episode, and has your son ever communicated any degree of advocacy to you at all?
I talk to him about everything. People always tell me when they find out he's nonverbal, they're like, you should talk to him. I'm like, I talk to him more than I talk to anybody else on earth. Like, it's constant.
That is a common misconception, is when someone is nonverbal, even if that means like an everyday thing in every situation, or for example, my version of being nonverbal, where if I am really overstimulated or after a meltdown, I also experience becoming nonverbal. Everyone has this misconception that when you are nonverbal, that means you're not processing anything. But it's honestly the opposite. It means you're processing too much. So much so that neurologically speaking, you can't even verbalize anything because your whole body, your nervous system is so overwhelmed and flooded that you cannot even utter words or process what you would want to say. I think there's levels to it when you're nonverbal, right? I have different types of nonverbal modes. At its worst, I can't process what other people are saying at all, let alone my own thoughts and being able to verbalize it. But there are lighter moments of me being nonverbal where I could still process what everyone is saying, but I can't seem to connect myself to my own body, what I'm going through, how all of this translates to thoughts. Everything about me is shut off and I have no access to it. Therefore, I can't be able to even speak it either. There's like that huge disconnect there. But yeah, this shows how ignorant people are, you know, like people giving this dad advice like, oh, you should speak to your son still. And he's just like,
there's things he doesn't understand, like fundamental things that he doesn't understand. He
like
doesn't
social
understand
things.
that I'm going to do this. He doesn't understand what autism is. He doesn't understand things
Social
like that. But I tell him,
constructs.
I'm like, we're going to talk about you. We're going to have, you know, all the great things about you. When I relate to my son, what I try to do is I try to put myself in his shoes. So I write a blog about him. I try to do autism appreciation, I call it, where I talk about the positives of autism and how he's a great kid, not despite autism, but in many ways because of autism.
That makes me very happy to hear. I'd love to read your blog.
Thank you. Okay.
𝗬𝗶𝘁 viewers, you should read his blog.
That's my hype man. Now you're my new hype man. Thank you.
So back to the prompt.
Just like what you have said, I was one of the few people that faced the R word, especially in high school. I haven't been called disabled for any reason to be offensive, for me anyways, but I do see like how it can be debatable and questionable because it can come off as like you're trying to say this person can't do something just because they can't think accordingly, or maybe cannot walk accordingly, or can't concentrate accordingly.
Do you identify or view yourself as disabled?
Yes, but I don't personally find it offensive for me because I feel like there's just uglier words. But I do respect where everyone else is coming from, though.
we love all these
What do you think
people
of that
being
word
so
disabled? Does it bother you?
gray.
Disabled, for me, the kind of autism I have is a communication disorder. Like, for example, when I was a little girl, I walked around in circles talking to myself. I wanted to join the conversation, but I didn't know how, and my brain wouldn't do what I was telling it to do. And
Just by the way she's describing herself or answering the question, honestly, shows me that her mom has to tell her a lot about herself, which I'm not even saying is a bad thing, because for some people who, again, has communication issues or certain processing issues, it's really hard for us to understand how others are seeing us and what that means to the context of all these different situations. It's hard for us to conceptualize our own characteristics, why we do something and whatnot, because that is reliant on you understanding all of these other concepts and knowing how to translate it into those different conversations. And so all people are seeing is perhaps her mom having a lot of control over her and what she's able to say or do or speak on. But at the same time, she probably needs that, because if her mom wasn't doing that for her, she may not even be able to express her experience altogether. You know what I'm saying? Because I've worked with people like her. They have all these thoughts, yes. They're aware, they're cognizant. It's not like they're completely not there. It's just, how are you even supposed to explain that you're a person who walks around in circles and talks to yourself and that's a part of your autism if you don't even conceptualize that that's abnormal? You know what I'm saying? But I could see why people get really defensive on her behalf and critical of the mom, because they don't like feeling as if everything she's saying and doing is contingent on her mom being there. There's like an aspect of, where is her authenticity in it? Is it even there? And I think people are just really fearful of autistic individuals being taken advantage of. Honestly, anyone being taken advantage of, but especially those that we identify with and things like that. But at the same time, how many of us wish that we had people who cared enough to be there in our corners and stand up for us in certain moments or help us in certain moments where we really needed it, instead of being out on our own, having to handle everything by ourselves when it was really hard. So there's always many reasons why someone is the way they are.
I've had 20 years of speech therapy, 15 years of occupational therapy to be able to talk like everyone else to get where I am today.
So you think it's okay to use the word disability because it helps people understand how hard you've worked to be in the conversation?
Yes, it does. And I'm even in the therapy right now.
That's true. And I would agree with Abby on that. I would say that because this autism word and spectrum now has successful people and writers who are neurodivergent, and people who have had 20 years of speech therapy.
And I'm one of them.
You are, and rock star over here, but it's confusing. So I like the word disability, because when we're in public and Abby has a stim or arms are flailing, you know.
Yeah, and some people on the spectrum tend to rock back and forth and flop their hands. And
that's a stim.
Oh, why you gotta
That's
call
not
me
the
that
stem
out? I was doing that just now.
No, literally, I've been holding my hands like this.
I do
that's
this
a
too.
good thing, though.
I even do this, or but I don't rock back and forth.
Right, but that's not your stim, but other people do like that. So, but
not
whatever
mine.
that thing is, I just feel like if you understand that autism can be different, can be a disability, because I don't have to stem, I can stem. This is a stem too.
And everybody
but it's not
stems.
imperative for me to do that to be in this conversation right now.
I do have a question though, because the R word kind of came up amongst a few of you guys. Is there any nuance with that, in that being not offensive or offensive?
No. Just straight up, no. Because the thing is, we've come such a long way in terms of like, well, I don't know if a long way in terms of understanding autism. I think that's why we're all here. But just more like we've gone past that word. And I remember I used to work at a coffee shop, and there was this guy.
That is honestly such a neurodivergent way to answer a question. Because I do that too, if you guys haven't noticed. Like, you'll start saying your answer, and then all these other thoughts pop up into all these other subcategories. And then you kind of have to make these little anecdotes as you're going through your sentences, like blah 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 blah. You know what I'm saying? I'm like following their thought process so closely. I understand how they think, and I'm loving it. It's doing things to my brain.
Who would never call people that word, but he just would say like, oh, that's the R word, like that's that, like whatever. He was kind of like one of those people that was kind of like, well, it's just a word, and it's just a word. I'm like, well, there are several other English words to use. So it's just like, I don't really see the medical field has gotten past it. We should get past it.
The year is not 1940, and at this point in today's modern language, it is really an insult. Especially going to a public high school, I hear that a lot.
Yeah.
How did this go from disabled to the R word?
Can the greeters step up?
I guess because they're trying to say if it's
I get emotional thinking about this. I still am struggling, especially now. It just feels like everyone is,
This is a really sensitive topic.
I never had any friends until 3rd grade. I only
I'm
talked
getting
about
chills.
Pokemon with him, and that was it. And he was probably likely also on the spectrum, and I was so severely bullied at my public elementary school. Girls tended to be nicer to me.
It's a common misconception that people think autistic people can't empathize, but it's not the case at all. Oftentimes what I see is that autistic people are so empathetic that it's not just like a mentality, it's a full body sensory experience. Like me sitting here listening to him, feeling his emotions, I felt my whole body just tingle from my heart. It crept up my throat into my face and all over my arms. I just felt this tingling sensation of like, oh my God, I know how that feels and I feel for him, and I'm just like holding space for that pain to be expressed and to share this moment with him. You could see it with the other autistic individual. I'm so bad with names. The other guy who just like had to take deep breaths because he was also empathizing. I mention this because a lot of the times with the autistic people that I work with, they struggle a lot with being able to identify it. So 𝗪cie, right? It's not even trying to teach them what emotions are. It's first trying to tap into how your body physically responds and how it feels when you are processing something. So for that guy, when he's empathizing, he's breathing very deeply and he probably feels very tense, right? For me, it's like I get all these chills all over my body and I have to like put my hand on my chest just to like get myself to calm down a little bit, or else I'll get really overstimulated.
As opposed to boys.
I see eye to eye.
Yeah, I have a lot of trauma that I'm working through regarding bullying, and that way I find it harder to talk to men even today for that reason. I'm lonely. I'm so lonely. I channel all of it into my music. I channel every aspect of my loneliness and trying to understand other people and trying to connect with other people in my music and my songwriting. It is my coping mechanism, and I just try and keep myself busy to cope with the fact that I really, really struggle to make friends.
When I was a little girl, life was very, very hard. I didn't have any friends. I wanted to join the conversation, but I couldn't because my brain wouldn't do what I was telling it to do. And in high school, I sat alone at lunch, and didn't really have any friends until I didn't start making friends till I was like 17 or 18.
Same here.
Somewhere around
Same
there.
Here.
And
Truly.
because that's why I've always wanted to be an adult, because I knew I'd have more language, it'll be easy for me to communicate, and life in general would have been easier.
I actually can relate with Aiden to an extent. I had a difficult time making friends because, well, at the time when I was younger, of course, I didn't know I had autism, but I was also a little bit different. I was those autistic kids who kind of was a social butterfly at the time, so believe it or not, aside from how I appear, I was such an extrovert. I was being seen in middle school as kind of like a class clown. And then by like high school, the first high school I went to, which was a really bad school, I was put the gay stigma because of my voice, because all the guys there, their voices are more like low like this. but at the time I was like, more higher like this. But it was hard. And by the other high school, which I spent the rest of my high school years, I made a little bitty friends, but people who actually did not just disregard me and did not see me as like a walking joke or some potential lost cause, because a lot of them was weirdly enough afraid of me, of what I can do. So,
well, I would like to chime in case it were to. Okay, never mind.
In a sec.
Yeah. Well, now I don't remember. Well, no, I do. I have friends. I do have friends, but I only have friends one at a time. I have never in my life ever truly been a part of a friend group. And I have some of the most beautiful friendships ever, and they're so quality because it's just me and that one friend. But man, I just wish I could be a part of a group. I was out in public recently. I saw 4 artsy-looking people that were about my age, and they were all talking and having a blast, and I was just looking at them just like, When
The
am I
jealousy
gonna,
kicks in.
yeah, when am I going to have that? That's what I wanted to add. We can move on now.
Yeah, that's something as well that I think I have yet to talk about, but I think often about is our inability to maintain multiple relationships at once, even though that is so necessary for your well-being and for the well-being of your life, honestly, in a very objective way, because us as humans, we need community. We've always needed community, even in how society is today, with how advanced it is and with how capitalism is. We still need community to survive. We can't do everything by ourselves. We're not made to survive on our own. And yet, for a lot of disabled people, we end up having to do a lot of things by ourselves because society doesn't know how to integrate us. Honestly, we aren't taught to know how to integrate ourselves either, is also another part of it, because it's not just people serving us and we're just sitting there hoping to reap the benefits. It's also us not having the knowledge from our caregivers, our parents, our mentors throughout our lives telling us, you as someone living with this disability, for example, these are ways that you could work with what you have in the world that we live in today. We aren't taught to figure out how to balance relationships or how to be a part of a community in an effective way that allows us to integrate the autism rather than suppress it and mask over it. I feel like a lot of the times, autistic individuals' mental health and their ability to survive and be somewhat independent, a lot of it kind of roots back to the fact that they don't have community, that we are so freaking lonely and have no support, have no companionship. And it's not because we're incapable of it or we don't want it. It's just because with how everything is built in our society, it's like we don't have what we need to know how to tap into everything all at once. I've always been the type of person that can only handle one relationship at a time. And when I say relationship, I'm not just talking about romantic relationship. This is also friendships too. But like him, I can only handle one person at a time in my life. I have a really hard time being able to be a part of a group or being able to have all these friends that I'm keeping up with. This is why my friends always joke around with me that they see me maybe once a year if they're lucky. I've carried a lot of shame in not being able to maintain my friendships when I'm in a relationship, because we always hear people talking about how if someone drops you as a friend when they enter a relationship, they don't care about you, they care too much about the relationship, they're codependent, like all of these negative labels on that person, as if they're choosing to prioritize that one person in their life and they don't care about the other people and those people are disposable to them. For so many years, I thought I was that person. I'm like, I'm just a bad friend. I guess I don't care about my friends like I thought I do, because when I enter relationships, I'm incapable of keeping up with those friends. And I'm barely capable of keeping up with my partner sometimes. The thing is that it's not even that I'm incapable of keeping up with a group of friends, but here's the kicker. The only times in my life where I was able to even just a little bit keep up with my friends is moments where I was unemployed and I wasn't in a relationship with another person. And that's kind of what defines the disability aspect of autism. Yes, non-autistic people could struggle with balancing things too, for example, but is it to the extent where in order for you to balance this one aspect of your life, you cannot be working a job at the same time? Or if you had to work a job, you are completely unable to balance having a friend group or balance having a relationship simultaneous. And normal non-autistic people just simply don't deal with those disabling aspects to the extent that we experience it.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because I disagreed. I was the only one on my side who disagreed, but I also can pinpoint each of you in something that you said, because I definitely can relate. I think I've gotten good at developing surface level friendships. As an adult, I still don't really know how to find that line between like opening myself up, but also not expecting the same in return from the other person, because sometimes they don't know how to give the same in return. So it's just, it's not just necessarily like that the other person has bad intentions. It's just the way we communicate and the way that we think can be different and just not always work. And I think that's still something I'm struggling with.
Even here, like hearing you guys over there when I was disagreeing, the level of openness that you're willing to share these stories is like it's what we always say we want. Like as a parent, you go, I want to have a kid who's honest and who doesn't lie and who doesn't do these things. And then I'm like, he has autism. Like, oh, I'm like, no, but that's exactly what we all want, right? We want that thing, and they don't get it. And I've struggled with my son. My son is not. I mean, social was always, in my opinion, like out the window for him. He's not very, like, he doesn't want to socialize, hang out with people, but what ended up happening was my girlfriend's son is minimally verbal, and he's known him since he was like 3 years old. And whenever we would get together, he would always like try to play with my son, and Lucas was just kind of like, whatever. And we noticed about a year ago, they were in the pool, and like Lucas started like following him around the pool, trying to like tag him. I was like, oh my God, is this happening? And we've noticed slowly that he's been doing that too. I see that. I worried about him having, people be his friend. I worry about people taking advantage of him. I worry about neurotypical people sometimes having the worst intentions. These people who don't have disabilities are the ones who sometimes do some of the cruelest and worst things. So it's always been, I'm not so worried about him and friends, I'm worried about the other people around him to be his friends sometimes, a little more.
As far as developing friendships, it's ironic because I'm insanely social. Like I traveled Europe by myself with a backpack and I'm still friendly with people I met for a week on a train in Venice. When Abby was, as she told you, a little kid, she almost didn't see them.
It's like I didn't see them.
It was like other kids, she just walked right past them. She was so in her own world, which is her kind of autism.
And can I explain
I've
the
worked with
whole
kids
Ariel
like that.
story?
You can, sure. why
And
not?
when I was a really little kid, when I first saw the movie Walt Disney's The Little Mermaid, I really understood Ariel, and she inspired
At
me.
least the mom lets her talk and chime in. I feel like people fail to see those little nuances. What I look for is those little responses of when Abby's like, can I say this thing? And the mom's like, yes. Never once did Abby want to talk about something and the mom literally said no, yet at least. So I guess we'll see. I feel like the mom allows Abby, I think her name is, to have agency when she wants to. Yes, it's the mom's job to be there to try to determine when that support is needed because Abby is not necessarily able to ask for that support or even understand when she needs that support. Honestly, like you can't satisfy everyone. I really feel for the mom in that sense because like she is obviously someone who cares about Abby. And to put yourself and your daughter out there to be critiqued in that way is very scary. Like if I had an autistic daughter and I was doing all that I can to help her, and then all of these people are like, you're controlling, blah, 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 I would be so devastated because in my mind, I'd be like, if I wasn't controlling, the world would just eat my daughter up. And she would not have any chance. Her job is to be there for Abby, sometimes in a more assertive manner, because that's what her disability needs and calls for. And I think it's a good thing. But I am still open to the mom perhaps surprising me in a not good way too. We will see.
Ariel was my inspiration because it's just like how where she wanted to be with the humans and I wanted to be with the neurotypical people, just like that. And when Ariel became human, she couldn't talk. That's how I felt.
That's exactly
See, the
kind of
mom let her
autism
go
I
on that
have too,
tangent and tell her story.
Yeah, except
And
I
now
never
thinking back to
verbalized
that
it like you
moment
did.
in the beginning of the video where the mom told Abby to go stand in the line again, I honestly think that it's because she was seemingly confused on what was going on, which is understandable. We all know we could get confused sometimes and very flustered in social situations. They're literally in a group of people filming stuff, so there's all this equipment, unfamiliar environment. I can understand just getting to a point where you're like, I don't know where to stand or what's going on. I'm confused. So the mom saw that perhaps she needed to be helped, and that's why she was like, oh, go stand in the line, because the mom was able to deduct that she originally might have wanted to go sit down, but then started to walk back and then got confused, maybe even flustered. And so the mom helped direct her back to the line where Abby was probably trying to go to anyways. But I guess people might have interpreted that as the mom controlling what she was doing and what her answer was going to be.
I have looked down on someone for being autistic.
I'll sit next to you, why not? Yeah, I mean, I have. I mean, I'm not proud of it because I was diagnosed around 3 or 4 years old and my parents got me intervention very early. Because of that, I was able to get coping skills and learn how to mask and learn how to essentially be like everyone else. I'm at a weird point, like the last couple years, I've really have come to realize that like the mask I've had to put on has really been kind of like cemented onto my face. And like my autistic self is like something I'm still trying to chip away at. Like when I was younger, like I was never the one to bully anyone, but like I would take note of like other kids who I felt like were autistic, like whether they stimmed noticeably or not. And I kind of subconsciously would just sort of be like, well, I can mask. Why can't you keep it together? For lack of a better way of saying it. And I'm certainly not proud of it. And it's something that I definitely am working towards correcting about myself. But for me to say that I haven't done that would be a lie, which is why
we love an honest person. We love an honest person. He is owning up to his shit. He's like, I have internalized ableism. I'm still working on it. I know it's a part of me. Yes, I love that. That's another thing is we all have essences of internalized ableism. Even if you think you're the most politically correct, moral person, there is still essences of ableism that is in you somehow. I feel like internalized ableism is basically just resentment that you hold within yourself because of how you were failed and how you weren't supported in the ways that you deserved and needed. Why did they get to do that and I don't? There's just a lot of unresolved issues there that is so real. You know, I think I struggle with that even outside of the conversation of autism. When I was younger, anytime I saw someone with like a supportive family, supportive relationship, supportive community, I would feel a sense of resentment. If I saw someone being so authentic to themselves, so free and just like unafraid to make mistakes and unafraid to put themselves out there, there's all these aspects of myself that felt horrible. And I would find ways to look down on this person or just not see their light because I was internally resentful that I wasn't allowed to have that same space that they were able to have. But I think the turning point is realizing that you have to go back and tend to those parts of yourself so that you could begin to give yourself a chance to be as authentic as you can in your day-to-day life moving forward, regardless of whether or not you were set up right.
I never really spoke or never looked down on those on the spectrum. And this was obviously before I found out I was autistic because I was diagnosed at 2. And then I later found out by like, I think middle school year, but I never looked down on them because in the end of the day, for me anyways, they're human and let alone, aside from me being autistic, I'm also can be looked down because I'm, as you all see, I'm alternative and stuff, so there's just no point, for me anyways, to look down on someone that's on a spectrum or anyone who's with special needs or has any other disabilities that they may not have asked for anyways.
From the information I've gathered, the 4 of us who are on the spectrum were all diagnosed very early. I would be very, very curious to know somebody who was diagnosed much later's perspective on that, especially since for so many of these later diagnosed people, they don't realize they're on the spectrum immediately.
I've sat at parties with Asperger kids, which I know you're not supposed to say that word, but the intelligence in an Asperger person is such a gift. I learned all about astronomy from this one kid in 2 hours, and his mother was saying, oh, leave the nice lady alone. And I was like, no, please let him stay with me. This is so cool. So that's because I'm coming from that place of looking at neurodiversity, autism, Asperger's in a different way because I've been around it for 25 years.
I'm a teacher's aide.
From what I've observed so far, I don't think the mom is invalidating. So when she uses the word Asperger's, I don't interpret it as her trying to invalidate, let's say, level 1 autistics or lower support needs autistics. I see it as her perhaps having an outdated language that she's using. I don't know if the mom's been able to adjust as quickly or if it's just like muscle memory habit. But the way I interpret it, and again, I could be completely wrong, but I'm just saying the way I'm interpreting it is the mom is just wanting to distinguish between level 1 autism and level 3 autism, lower support needs autistics and higher support needs autistics. Because the thing is, actually important to distinguish the two in a conversation because we are not living the same type of reality. We have different characteristics, different struggles. I feel like she is wanting to distinguish it, but it's just easier and faster to say Asperger's for her because saying level 1 autism or like low support needs autism is just so many words, right? And she's again, in a situation that is kind of stressful. There's a lot of people. This video is going to be viewed by a lot of people, hundreds of thousands, if not a million. For the sake of just getting her thought across, Asperger children, people who are not like my daughter, people who may still be able to have conversation with others more successfully than her daughter would. And she's basically trying to talk about how people with Asperger's, I guess I would be part of that group that she's talking about, have all this knowledge of these topics that other people wouldn't necessarily have or be interested in. And they could just talk to her about it for hours and hours and not know when to stop. And then when another caretaker comes in and tries to get them to leave her alone, she was like, no, I really love this conversation. I want this person to just be able to socialize with me and show up authentically and be here to appreciate what they have to offer and who they are. That's what I got from what the mom said. It's important to get context when you are going to go critique someone. I'm not saying critiquing someone is bad, but I feel like the way you critique someone has to adjust to the context. Are you ridiculing someone for something because they did something that wasn't okay and you just want them to know that and you want to shame them for it? Or are you gonna provide a safe space for that person to learn about how they could integrate better vocabulary next time or more updated vocabulary next time because it's important too? And how can you have that conversation in a way that's less aggressive and can actually get to the point and isn't going to completely invalidate everything that this woman and this mom has done and will continue to do for her daughter? Maybe this could be a learning moment for her to not use Asperger's, but at the same time is invalidating everything about this woman, whether or not she's a good mother, and projecting all of these interpretations of her actions in a negative way, going to elicit this woman to even want to listen to other people and adjust herself. I don't think so. If you missed up one time for one thing and everyone's like, you're a bad mom, you're controlling, blah, 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 you never did anything good, and they just start to like go down all these lists of why you're just a terrible person, you're automatically put in this place where you can't be open. You're gonna have to close yourself off at some point and be like, you're making a lot of points that aren't valid, and so I can't listen to you. You're not a source I could trust. But if you're a person who can actually stay in there and take the context in and observe everything simultaneous to each other and be like, oh, these are ways that she's a great mother. She used a term that isn't objectively correct, but I know she didn't use it in a way that is like offensive or demeaning. But for whatever reason, she just didn't use the right word. So like perhaps I could just educate her on that or encourage her to use another term or another word that is more accurate, you know? All right, so I'm actually stopping the video here and I'm going to be making a part 2 because the conversation is too juicy. There's too much substance to it and I can't make a 2-hour-long video. If you guys want to tune in, the second part will be uploaded next week. Stay tuned for that. When are we going to talk about how people of color either go their whole lives not diagnosed or they get diagnosed way later in life and their spectrum looks completely different from the stereotype that is shaped after white individuals? People who claim to be so pure, so socially and politically correct are the same people that are going to attack you in such a crazy way. It's one and the same, honestly. It's like purity culture in religion repackaged. At what point are we just all different humans with different neurotypes and society has to change the fundamental values to support different humans? Neurodivergency, autism isn't necessarily a disability, but because of how our society is set up, it is a disability. That doesn't make sense. If you disagree with them and you don't listen to them, then how do you know what you're disagreeing with? I wonder if the mom's processing that these conversations are all things that she is actively fighting against when she is supporting the need for stereotypes. But my prediction is that the accommodations we need to be integrated more successfully in society and to be able to thrive better are the same accommodations that neurotypical people would actually need and benefit from.